Hi, it's Warren Sprouse. You're on the Bible Forum. We're here every Sunday night from 8 until 10 p.m. Eastern. We look at life through a biblical lens. Tonight, we're going to look at Orlando. What is Orlando about? You saw the shootings, you saw the coverage. What's going on down there? Our president got up immediately after this horrific massacre and said that there was no evidence that the Orlando attack was directed by the Islamic State. I would have answered if I had a microphone. I would have got up behind him and I would have said, there's no evidence that the tooth fairies did it either. What kind of an announcement is that? I mean, that's a dull. Tell me what I already know. But the realities are starting to creep out. One is that the man was Islamic, that he was radicalized. His own father is radicalized. He's, oh no, it's not like, we're going to look at that a little bit later. The man did the deed during Ramadan. The man praised all sorts of Islamic terrorists. The man called 911 in the middle of what he was doing 3, 4, 5 times to make sure everybody knew what he was doing. And he said he was doing this in the name of Allah. But it was not being orchestrated, directed by the Islamic State. Doesn't mean it wasn't connected to Islam. The executive director of Faith in America, Eliel Cruz, this is an Islamic hate group, says there is a cognitive dissonance when public officials ask us to pray while the majority of the world religions promote anti-LGBT theology. Well, who's that? That's us, isn't it? Faith in America is an organization that attempts to end the harm to LGBT youths. It says is caused by religious teachings. This man doesn't understand the disconnect between religious types praying and those same religious types promoting anti-LGBT theology. Cruz points out that just last month in Congress, Representative Rick Allen from Georgia's 12th District led a Republican policy group's opening prayer by reading Bible passages that condemn homosexuality and those who by their unrighteousness suppress the truth. He was reading from Romans chapter 1, the end of that chapter, where it says God gave them over to a depraved or a reprobate mind so that they would do what they shouldn't be doing. That they become filled with every kind of wickedness, evil, greed, and depravity, full of envy, murder, strife, deceit, malice, and on it went. You know the passage. We've talked about it here. I wish they'd invited me to come and let me set the stage before this guy read the passage so that they would understand what the passage is talking about. Romans chapter 1 starts by describing and defining and illustrating the decline from when God set humanity on the planet until now, and that each individual human being, as they fall down, as they move downward away from God, go down this path. But so do societies. And there are triggers, there are places in there, switches, that when a person decides that they don't want to do this, it leads to that, and they become this. And then as they are doing that and they further decide they don't want it, then they become that. And on until finally you get to the end of the chapter, which is the end of this process, where God then gives them over to a reprobate mind. He gives them over to a mindset that makes no sense. It does to them, but it doesn't make sense to a decent human being filled with every kind of wickedness and evil and greed and depravity and envy and murder. There is no hope for that person. And in that list is homosexuality. Normal human beings, uninfluenced by anything else going on, do not kill their babies. It takes a while to get a human being to that place. Cruz went on to say a handful of biblical passages condemn homosexuality. These include perhaps the most oft-repeated: if a man practices homosexuality, having sex with another man as with a woman, both men have committed a detestable act. They must both be put to death, for they are guilty of a capital offense. And he quotes that from Leviticus chapter 20. Likewise, the Quran condemns homosexuality and recommends stoning as a form of punishment. The Quran says, "For ye practice your lusts on men in preference to women, ye are indeed a people transgressing beyond bounds, and we rain down on them a shower of brimstone." He's taking offense at both camps because they don't like homosexuality. Apparently, he's in support of it. But he goes on to say that for many modern readers of Scripture, these passages are meant to be read in context and should not be taken literally. He's talking about the difference between the Mosaic Law and New Testament grace. But how are we to know? At what point do we stop taking a written passage literally and start applying other principles to it? Well, you know, because you listen to the show. You know, because you've taken the course at the Bible Institute of Charleston.org. You know that you abandon a literal translation when the context demands it, and not before. We talk about this in terms of the science of interpretation. Words only mean what the writer intended they mean. They mean certain things according to definition, but as he puts them together, he has an intent. And that intent is clearly determined by the context and the grammar, the way he is structuring the sentence. There are a lot of social ills condemned in the Bible, and not simply under Mosaic law. The Bible takes a stand against manslaughter, against slavery, against infanticide. That's abortion. Against thievery, against divorce, against lying, stealing, adultery. These are in the Bible in the same parts as some of the other stuff, and for the same reasons. But for some reason, the critics pick out the ones they don't want to participate, or they don't want to have to be condemned for. They embrace the ones they cherish. They ignore the ones they don't care about. And they do that without regard to the morality or the destructive influence that all of these negative things bring to a society. Today, because I want to kill my unborn baby, I can do it. It's my right. It isn't balanced by the rights of the innocent. It isn't balanced by common sense or decency. It isn't balanced by honor, integrity, or anything. I want to kill my unborn baby. The baby I'm not ready for this now. It would be a hardship on me. Or the baby's going to be deformed, or whatever it might be, and it's my right. I want to kill my baby because I want to be free from my marriage. No, I take that back. I want to kill my baby because it's interfering with my marriage. It might destroy my marriage. But I want to be free from my marriage too, if I want to, and I want to be able to do that without penalty. I don't want to have to go through a big, horrendous thing. If I want a divorce, it's my right. Forget the children. Forget the society. Forget what divorce does to a culture and to individuals. Forget all that. It's about my feelings. Well, I made a mistake. I married the wrong person. She's not hey. You make a mistake and you cut your finger off. Deal with it. It's the way it works. Nope, not today. Because I want to engage in dangerous and destructive sexual behavior. It's my right. In my opinion, my behavior's good. In my opinion, those who condemn me and or that behavior are the bad ones. Isn't it amazing? The cumulative and corporate judgment of 7,000 years of human history is wrong because I want. Now, the obvious construct of my body mitigates homosexual behaviors. But somehow it's all the fault of the Bible. It's all the fault of the Quran. Well, ask Hammurabi. You know him, don't you? You've heard of the ancient Code of Hammurabi? It predates both of these other things. They believe this thing was put together in 1754 BC. That's before the Mosaic Code. The Code of Hammurabi says in marriage, if she had been a bad wife, you can send her away. He gets to keep the children. He gets to keep her dowry. Or he could degrade her to the position of a slave in his own house where she would have food and clothing. She might bring an action against him for cruelty and neglect, and if she proved her case, obtain a judicial separation, taking with her her dowry. But no other punishment would fall on the man. If she did not prove her case, but proved to be a bad wife, she would be drowned. If she were left without maintenance, that's money for food and shelter, while her husband was away, involuntarily away, perhaps conscripted for battle or taken in slavery or anything of that nature, she was permitted to cohabit with another man. But if the husband comes back, she must return to her husband. And the children of that second union would stay with that father. They wouldn't follow her back. And of course, if she had maintenance, if she could take care of herself, then the breach of the marriage tie would have been considered adultery. And adultery was punished with death, the death of both parties by drowning. But if the husband was willing to pardon his wife, the king might intervene to pardon the paramour as well. For incest with his own mother, both were burned to death. Incest with a stepmother, the man was disinherited. With a daughter, the man was exiled. With a daughter-in-law, he was drowned. With a son's betrothed, he was just fined. All of this is clearly prejudicial toward men. A wife who, for her lover's sake, procured her husband's death was gibbeted as a public hanging. A betrothed girl, seduced by her prospective father-in-law, took her dowry and returned to her family and was free to marry as she chose. Drowning was for adultery, for the rape of a betrothed maiden, for bigamy, for bad conduct as a wife, for seduction of a daughter-in-law. And there's not a Bible in sight. This is not a Bible thing. It's not a Quran thing. It's a society thing. The Bible has been credited with establishing the most equitable and constructive societies the world has ever seen. What does it not do? It does not condone sin. What do you want to do? You want to live as you please and not have to be condemned as being bad or destructive or demeaning or dangerous in terms of your behavior. And to accomplish that, well, you can live right, or you can live however you want and condemn everybody else who's trying to live right. Today, critics of the biblical Christianity complain that biblical moral standards are abusive, destructive, cruel, divisive. Think about it. What does the Christian say to the world? Don't kill that unborn baby. Where's that wrong? The Christian says marriage is important. It's a basic building block of a stable society. Divorce destroys that. Don't divorce. What's wrong with that? The Christian says homosexuality is wrong, that it's a sin against God. Your own body says it's wrong. Why is the Christian so terrible? Homosexual behavior is destructive to the human body and to the mind. These people don't live happy, healthy lives. The Christian says drunkenness, lewdness, drugs are bad. Anybody agree? Anybody disagree? Everybody has to agree. Do any of these things and you will suffer. Do any of these things and other people will suffer. Do them and you will incur God's wrath. You remember the guy who created us in his own image and said, don't do this? Islam, if you do any of the above, will come in and will kill you in the most heinous way possible as a lesson to other people. Are you homosexual? The Islamist says, we will beat you, we will cut you, we will tie you up, we will throw you off a mountain or a high building. Violate the restrictions surrounding Ramadan? Regardless of whether or not you're a Muslim, if you're in a Muslim community, we'll beat you, we'll cut you, and we will try very hard to kill you if you can't get away. But somehow biblical Christianity is the scourge, and Islam is a peace-loving religion. Case in point, the Washington Post has learned from a local lawmaker that a 21-year-old Afghan was skinned alive by the Taliban, who also ripped out his eyes. What was his crime? He was related as a distant relative to one of the Taliban's former commanders, one who betrayed them. He needed to suffer all of this. The gruesome incident, which has been reportedly documented in a video, and the photographs that come with it have been disseminated. It took place back in December in a remote region in central Afghanistan, and it raises the idea that maybe there's more Taliban brutality to come. These terrorists dragged the victim, identified as a laborer, from his house and cut out his eyes. The man was still alive and screaming when the attackers began carving the skin off his chest, leaving his heart exposed. They then threw his body off a 10-story cliff. Know any Christians that do that? And this is just the latest in a string of violent acts in Afghanistan the last 6 months. They're worried that things are starting to ramp up. In Istanbul, Turkey, a group of radical Islamists attacked a listening party where Radiohead, whoever that is, was holding this listening party for fans in support of their new album. The men reportedly stormed the record store, Velvet Indie Ground, in Istanbul, Turkey, used pipes to violently beat fans running away from the venue for drinking alcohol during the holy month of Ramadan. The witnesses said these men were intent on killing people. The Orlando shooter was clearly acting out as a Muslim. There was clear planning, buying the weapons. There was a deliberate choice of victims, homosexuals. There was the calls made to 911 declaring his position. The attack occurred during Ramadan. His statements to the victims indicate that he was doing this out of his support for Islam. We have since learned that the shooter's father hosted an anti-American TV talk show. His father's name is Sadiq Mateen. He appears in scores of online videos, including one he posted to Facebook about the time the son was embarking on this rampage. And in that one, he wears combat fatigues and salutes the camera. The elder Mateen speaks the Dari language in his often rambling videos, and it wasn't immediately clear what he was saying on that particular Sunday morning at 2 a.m., just when Omar was opening fire on innocent victims at this nightclub. The shooter was enrolled in an Islamic seminary run by an ex-con who, prosecutors said, recruited terrorists. He was enrolled at Marcus Dwayne Robertson's Fundamentalist Islamic Knowledge Seminary, according to law enforcement. At the online school recently renamed Timbuktu Seminary, Robertson is known as Abu Tawbah. But biblical Christianity is the threat that needs to be eliminated. Does anybody see a problem?